Welcome to the tale of Lady Olenna, a Game of Thrones story. Written by Brian M. Brumbaugh. Read by Gwyneth Paltrow. Chapter 1, The Redwyne Rose. The arbor, 232 to 240 AC. The arbor smelled of grapes, gold, and smugness. High-born girls were meant to be docile, sweet, spun sugar and silk. But Olenna Redwyne was born with vinegar in her veins and a voice sharp enough to skin a septon. At 9, she already ran the servants ragged. At 10, she corrected her history tutor's pronunciation of Valyria. And by 11, she could distinguish between a summer vintage and a merchant's lie just by sniffing the cork. The Redwynes were rich, obscenely so. Their vineyards stretched like lazy serpents across the hills, fat with promise and privilege. But all that sun-soaked splendor bored Olenna to death. While other girls played with dolls or embroidered lions and roses, Olenna practiced her scowl in the mirror and imagined what she'd say if the king of Westeros ever dared ask for her hand. The betrothal came in the spring of her 9th name day. Prince Daeron Targaryen, a silver-haired boy with dreamy eyes and all the charisma of a moldy peach. He arrived on a sleek ship with dragons on the sails and too many teeth in his smile. The court fawned, her parents preened. The maesters nodded approvingly. Olenna wanted to scream. Instead, she curtsied and whispered to her handmaid, "I'd rather marry a goat. At least they know what to do with a woman." The handmaid choked on her gasp. Olenna didn't laugh. She studied Daeron like she studied her father's wine lists, looking for flaws, for imbalance, and she found it. A limp handshake, a distant gaze, a blush when the squire leaned too close. Oh yes. There was something off, something that no one dared mention aloud. But Olenna didn't need a septon's permission to know the truth. He didn't like girls. At least, not in the way a betrothed boy should. That night, while others celebrated the engagement with sweet wine and sonnets, Olenna sat in her solar with a quill, a scroll, and a stolen bottle of her uncle's Arbor Red. She made a list titled, "Ways to Ruin a Betrothal Without Getting Exiled." And frame him for fondling the septon's cat? Too obvious. Flirt with his brother? Risky, especially if his brother was worse. Poison? Too permanent. Whisper campaign? Promising? She tapped her lip with a feathered end and smiled. Time to make some rumors grow. Over the next few years, Olenna perfected her craft. She befriended the Targaryen ladies, listened, asked innocent questions. "Oh, how is Prince Daeron adjusting to court? I heard he's taken quite the liking to that Braavosi fencing instructor. Handsome man, isn't he?" She accidentally left poems in Daeron's chambers, verses filled with longing, male names, and a suspiciously familiar handwriting. She pouted at feasts and danced a little too close to his cousin. And when the cousin blushed, she leaned in and whispered, "Relax, I'm not that desperate." At 15, she was summoned to the capital for formal courtship. She wore a black gown and refused to smile. When Queen Rhaella asked why she wasn't more excited, Olenna replied, "Your Grace, I was hoping for a dragon, not a kitten." That earned her a private scolding and a secret laugh from one of the princesses. The princess whispered, "You're either mad or brilliant." Olenna replied, "The difference is whether I win." By 18, the engagement crumbled. Officially, Daeron chose a different path. Unofficially, Olenna's whispers had taken root like weeds in spring. The maesters claimed he broke it off. Olenna let them believe it. Publicly, she was gracious. Privately, she threw a feast for her closest friends and toasted the end of her betrothal with a smirk and a very, very expensive bottle of red wine reserve. "To Daeron," she said, raising her cup. "May he find a man who appreciates poetry more than politics." Someone dropped their goblet. Laughter followed like thunder. Outside her chambers, the sun dipped behind the arbor hills. Birds sang. Vines curled along the stone like lazy green snakes. Inside, Olenna sat cross-legged on her bed, flipping through suitor portraits with one hand and scratching her thigh with the other. "Too old," she muttered, tossing one aside. "Too stupid, too bald, too—" Bolton. She held up one last sketch. A young man with laughing eyes, a foolish grin, and a hawk on his arm. "Luther Tyrell." Olenna said. "He's pretty. But is he house-trained?" She tossed the portrait onto the pile, stood, and stretched. The night was young. Her parents were hosting another noble feast. She needed to charm at least 3 lords, insult 2 septas, and sneak away before the roast duck was served. She looked in the mirror, smirked. The red wine rose wasn't sweet. She was sharp and growing thorns. Chapter 2, The Broken Betrothal, King's Landing and Old Town, 240 to 246 AC. Betrothal was supposed to be a blessing, an honor, a sacred pact between families. To Olenna Redwyne, it was a bloody choke collar. The moment she arrived in King's Landing at 15, escorted by a procession of peacocks in silk and her ever-sniffing septa, she knew the game had changed. The court was full of leeches, some in velvet, some in plate, all sucking for status, and in the middle of it, like a pale lily waiting to wilt, stood Prince Daeron Targaryen. He greeted her with an awkward bow, kissed her hand like he was apologizing to it, and then, gods forgive him, complimented her shoes. Soft leather, he said. Almost bravosi? Olenna smiled the way a cat smiles at a mouse just before the pounce. You noticed my shoes, your grace. I'm touched. He beamed, oblivious. She knew right then he'd never survive her. The weeks that followed were a blur of gowns, galas, and manufactured grace. Queen Rhaella insisted they dine together nightly. Courtiers whispered of royal marriage contracts being copied behind closed doors. Maesters smiled with that smug scholarly certainty of men who thought parchment meant permanence. And yet, Daeron was distant. He loved poetry more than politics. His eyes lingered on his male cousins. He flinched whenever Olenna made a crude joke or, 7 forbid, touched his arm. She tested him. Once, in the library, she leaned close enough for her breath to fog his spectacles. Do you dream of dragons, Daeron? She whispered, lips nearly brushing his ear. Or do you dream of something softer? He turned crimson, dropped his book, then tripped over the chair while trying to flee. She turned her efforts from seduction to sabotage. A trail of well-placed whispers slithered through the red keep-like wine in a cracked cask. She caught him in the garden with the stable boy. He writes poems to boys in Bravos. She saw him watching Sir Lionel too long at practice. Nothing confirmed, nothing denied, and all of it suspiciously consistent. Olenna played innocent, sipping Arbor Gold while shaking her head sympathetically at concerned noble ladies. Of course I'd never believe such nonsense, she said sweetly, though he does spend a lot of time in the scriptorium, with that Bravosi calligrapher. Handsome man, isn't he? Lady Ermesonda gasped. The queen's cousin nearly fainted. Olenna took another sip. Her finest hour came during the harvest ball at the Sept of Remembrance. She wore midnight blue and a crown of ivy, symbolic, she told guests, of unfulfilled vows. Her dance with Daeron was stiff, awkward, and cut short by a fainting spell. His, not hers. As he was carried off to recover from his nerves, Olenna turned to his cousin Arian and quipped, "Perhaps he's allergic to women, or me specifically. Either way, it saves us both some time." The scandal finally bloomed in 246 AC. Prince Daeron, citing spiritual unrest and unsuitability of the match, broke the betrothal. Maesters claimed it was his decision. Olenna didn't argue. Let the boy have his dignity. She returned to the arbor triumphant, draped in silk, kissed on both cheeks by her father, and greeted by a fresh shipment of Dornish wine she'd personally ordered as a breakup gift to myself. A banner hung across the garden the day she returned. Good riddance to royal rotten fruit. But not all was celebration. Her mother was livid. You've insulted the crown. Olenna shrugged. They started it by thinking I'd settle. You're unmarriageable now. Then I suppose I'll be very rich and very alone. Pity. The truth was more complex. Offers still came. Less royal, more real. Minor lords, old money, ambitious knights. None impressed her. She wanted someone useful, someone kind, maybe even someone she could tolerate in bed more than once. And then came Luther Tyrell. He arrived uninvited, fell off his horse the moment he dismounted, apologized to a rosebush, then offered it a biscuit. Olenna watched from the terrace, a goblet of chilled white wine in hand, expression unreadable. That one, she said. Her maid blinked. My lady? The biscuit whisperer. Summon him, but why? Olenna sipped. I've tried clever men, handsome men, royal men. Let's try kind and stupid. Might be a refreshing change. The next week, she accepted an invitation to Highgarden. The week after, she packed her things. By the end of the year, they were wed beneath the boughs of an ancient oak, surrounded by singing minstrels and highly confused guests. And when Luther kissed her for the first time, she leaned in close and whispered, "Don't ever look up while hawking." He blinked. "Pardon?" She smiled. "Just keep your eyes on the ground, dear. Trust me." Chapter 3, A Better Offer. Highgarden, 246 to 248 AC. Highgarden was beautiful in the same way a lion was majestic, if you forgot it had teeth. The air smelled like honeysuckle and opportunity. Bees buzzed, courtiers cooed, and Luther Tyrell, newly returned from some disastrous hunting trip involving a badger and a broken saddle, greeted his new bride with a smile so genuine it nearly made Olenna suspicious. They were married in late summer. The arbor was hot, but Highgarden was golden. Its fields were rich, its halls wide, its people stupidly loyal to a lord who once mistook a chamber pot for a wine bucket. But Olenna saw something the others didn't. Not potential in Luther, potential in Highgarden. Their wedding night was serviceable. Luther had a decent build, good stamina, and a tendency to narrate everything he was doing like a bard mid-battle. Olenna eventually placed a hand on his mouth. "No need to describe it, dear," she said. "Just keep doing it." He obeyed. And for the first time in her life, she experienced what the Septas always warned her about, mild enjoyment. Later, as he snored beside her with one foot sticking out of the blankets like a drunk dog, Olenna lay awake, plotting. She didn't need to love him. She just needed to make the most of him. It started with the household. She dismissed half the kitchen staff, replaced the steward with a sharp-eyed bastard girl from Old Town, and promoted a maid who could recite the Reach's tax codes by heart. Then came the bannermen. Olenna attended every feast, every hunt, every dull tourney where bored lords watched other bored lords try not to fall off horses. She listened, took names, smiled politely when Lord Oakheart boasted about the firmness of his melons, and Lady Fossaway offered backhanded compliments like poisoned fruit. One night, over arbor red and venison, she leaned into Lord Rowan and whispered, "Tell me, how does it feel to be the second richest man in the Reach?" He laughed. She didn't. The lovers came next. Not Luther's, Olenna's. She was discreet, always. There was the Dornish envoy with clever fingers and an even cleverer mouth, the Braavosi fencing tutor who taught her the eightfold stroke, and a hedge knight who barely spoke common, but made up for it with enthusiasm and a tattoo of a duck in a very compromising place. She never loved them, but she enjoyed them, and unlike her husband, they didn't try to compose songs afterward. She had rules, never more than twice, never from the Reach, and never someone who couldn't keep his damn mouth shut. Her chamber was hers, the silk canopy, the carved roses on the headboard, the secret panel in the wardrobe where she kept letters, poisons, and a necklace that had once belonged to a very rude lady from House Hightower. By 248 AC, Olenna had reshaped Highgarden. Luther handled hawking, hunting, and pretending to read reports. Olenna handled everything else, alliances, grain negotiations, marriage pacts, and the careful grooming of their heir. Mace Tyrell was born in spring, 10 pounds, pink, loud. "Looks like a swollen turnip," Olenna said, as the midwife handed him over. "Hopefully he grows into something more useful." Luther wept. Olenna did not. They had 2 more, Mina, who inherited Olenna's eyes and not much else, and Janna, who screamed every time someone mentioned marriage. She raised her children with love and discipline, heavy on the discipline. Mace was coddled by the servants, but Olenna made sure he never forgot who truly ruled the castle. When he was 5, he tried to give orders to the cook. Olenna appeared in the kitchen 5 minutes later, hair still wet from her bath, and boxed his ears in front of the entire staff. "You'll earn respect with action," she told him, "not by shouting, or crying, or looking like a pear in a doublet." He cried anyway. Olenna rolled her eyes. At night, when the halls were quiet and Luther was snoring into his pillow, Olenna would sit at her window with a map and a goblet. She didn't dream of dragons or thrones. She dreamed of influence, the kind no sword could break, the kind that lingered long after the banners were burned and the songs forgotten. She traced her fingers from Highgarden to King's Landing, then back again. Chapter 4. The Lady of Highgarden. The Reach, 248 to 258 AC. Olenna Tyrell became Lady of Highgarden the same way a spider becomes the center of its web. Quietly, strategically, and with absolutely no intention of being caught. By the time her second daughter was born, Olenna knew every bannerman's mistress, every bastard child, and every brewing scandal in the Reach. She kept records, not on parchment but in memory. Safer that way. Parchment could burn. Olenna's mind, never. She made herself indispensable to Luther without ever letting him know it. Let him ride, feast, and lose archery contests to his own son. Let him blather on about hawks and harvests. Olenna ran the house. Olenna chose the tutors. Olenna paid the debts. Olenna suggested, with sweet tones and veiled threats, which bannermen should receive gifts and which should receive silence. Luther once told a gathering of lords that his success came from listening to my heart. Olenna smiled. "He means me," she whispered to the Tarly air, "but he's too daft to say it." By 250 AC, Olenna was the most powerful woman in the Reach. Not officially, of course. Officially, she hosted teas and planned harvest festivals, but her guests included merchants, spies, lords with bad tempers and worse secrets, and more than one disinherited noble looking for a second chance. She didn't just know who was cheating on whom. She knew which banners would side with House Targaryen again if it ever came to war. She knew which maester at Old Town was funneling intelligence to King's Landing. And she knew that the Hightowers were watching. The Hightowers, with their long necks and longer grudges, hated her rise. She had not married into power, she had made it. They never forgave her for outmaneuvering them at the Festival of the Stars, when her daughter Janna's song outshone the Hightower heir's entire performance. "A fluke," Lord Hightower claimed. "Of course," Olenna replied. "Just like your son's birth." Her love life didn't dull either. There was the Lysine traitor with the jeweled tongue ring, the hedge knight who cried during climax, and the Summer Islander scribe with arms carved like gods and a voice like buttered rum. She kept him for a season, longer than most. He once asked her if she regretted her marriage. "Only when I listen to him explain clouds," she said. "And when you don't?" She smiled. "I remember what power tastes like, and Luther's name came with a full cellar and 10,000 swords." Some wines are worth aging for. Not every interaction was flirtation. Sometimes Olenna simply obliterated. She once told Lord Caswell, after he objected to her controlling the treasury, "Your coin purse may dangle between your legs, my lord, but it's still empty." She banned the word ladylike from the nursery and fired a septa for suggesting Mina learn needlework before trade routes. And she once advised a visiting noblewoman in full earshot of the court, "If your husband spends more time with his stable boy than his wife, dear, you might want to ask the horse how he likes it." Her children grew. Mace was now 10 and no sharper than a sack of pine cones. He jousted like a goat on stilts and flirted like a man halfway through a stroke. Olenna despaired, but privately. Publicly, she praised him, propped him up, and made sure his idiot charm didn't ruin the family legacy. When he asked her how to impress girls, Olenna sighed and handed him a book on economics. "Start with silver," she said. "The rest is negotiable." That year, Highgarden hosted a grand tourney. It was Luther's idea. Olenna made it happen. Knights came from as far as Dorne. Minstrels sang. Swans floated down the river like well-fed gossip. The queen's cousin even attended, and Olenna charmed her so thoroughly that a new line of Redwyne wine was requested for the capital. But it was the after-feast where Olenna truly triumphed. While Luther toasted to the beauty of roses and the bravery of boars, Olenna pulled aside 3 different lords, Rowan, Fossaway, and Oakhart, and offered them positions in a new advisory council she was forming. Unofficial, of course, but very real. Just a few bright minds, she told them, to keep Highgarden ahead of the game. They agreed, and she began shaping the Reach in her image. By 258 AC, Olenna had done the impossible. She had transformed herself from a cast-off Redwyne into the mind behind a house nearly equal in power to the Lannisters or Targaryens. And yet she never claimed credit. not openly. Instead, she leaned against Luther's shoulder at feasts, laughed at his terrible jokes, and kissed him when he sang her songs written by other men, because she did love him, in her own way. She loved his warmth, his honesty, the way he tried, even when he failed. She didn't love that he once tried to dry off a raven with his own small clothes, but one couldn't have everything. She just made sure she had enough. Chapter 5. The Queenmaker. Highgarden, Old Town, and beyond, 258 to 270 AC. They called it matchmaking. Olenna called it warfare. But instead of steel, she used silk. Instead of swords, she used secrets. And where most ladies played at courtship, Olenna played to win. Her first battlefield? Her own children. Mace Tyrell, first of his name, oaf of the reach. At 16, Mace was already tall, broad, and dim as dusk. He tried to spar like a knight, flirt like a poet, and rule like a lion. He succeeded at none of it. Olenna, to her credit, didn't give up on him. Not because she believed in his potential, because she understood something far more important. People listen to a crown even if it's worn by a cabbage. So she made Mace marriageable. Not desirable, mind you. There were limits even to her cunning, but acceptable. She fattened dowries, drafted letters to minor noble houses that practically wept with flattery, held accidental meetings with eligible ladies at feasts. One poor girl from House Graceford fainted during her dance with Mace. Olenna blamed the wine. The girl blamed the breath. He married Allery Hightower in the end. The Hightowers thought they were gaining control of House Tyrell. Olenna let them believe it. Privately, she wrote in her journal, "The boy will give them grandchildren. I'll give them ulcers." Mina and Janna, roses with thorns. Mina was dutiful, dull, and easy to marry off. Olenna paired her with her own nephew, Paxter Redwyne, partly to keep the wine flowing between families, partly because he was the only man who could tolerate Mina's endless talk of embroidery. Janna, on the other hand, was feral. She once threatened to stab a suitor in the eye with a hairpin. Olenna adored her. She let Janna run wild for a few years, the Reach's answer to a Dornish sand snake, she joked, before gently reeling her in with a promise of freedom, as long as it served the family's interests. Eventually, Janna married Lord Mathis Rowan's second son, a quiet, thoughtful man who secretly wrote smut under a false name. Olenna read it, twice. "It's filth," she told him at the wedding, "but entertaining. Keep your quill sharp and your hands off the chambermaids. The Reach unfolds." As her children settled, Olenna turned outward. She began advising bannermen on their own marriages, offered suggestions, dropped rumors. One sent a secret gift of lace gloves and a perfumed letter from a secret admirer to a young lady of House Tarly, who was being courted by a rather brutish knight. A week later, she married the more poetic brother. Olenna smiled over her wine. "Love conquers all," she said, "especially when bribed. The capital takes notice." By 265 AC, her influence reached Old Town and brushed the edges of King's Landing. She received letters with wax seals not meant for mere ladies. A raven from Casterly Rock, an unsigned missive from the Eyrie, a folded parchment from Dorne containing only 2 words, "Impressive work." She arranged for Tyrell fruit and arbor wine to be shipped to the Crown lands, gifts with strings so fine the fools tripped over them without seeing. And then came the royal request. Queen Rhaella, nearing the end of her patience with the ever-insufferable court, asked Olenna to serve as advisor to a visiting princess from Essos, an unruly thing with no sense of etiquette. Olenna accepted. The girl arrived barefoot, carrying a live lizard in her sleeve, and demanded to know where the dragon pits were. Olenna didn't blink. "Follow me," she said. "I've got a garden full of vipers. Close enough." By week's end, the girl kissed Olenna on the cheek and declared her the cleverest witch west of the narrow sea. Olenna took it as a compliment. Love, lust, and logistics. Even as she worked, Olenna didn't stop indulging. A sellsword from the Stepstones caught her eye, bronzed, brooding, and bad at backgammon. She kept him for a month. A Septon once confessed his sins to her in the middle of a kiss. "I've never done this before," he said breathlessly. She leaned in. "I have. I'll carry the guilt for both of us." The Rose Council. With Mace fumbling his way through leadership and Luther increasingly distracted by birds and ballads, Olenna formed a secret group of advisors she privately called the Rose Council, nobles, merchants, and even a retired pirate, all loyal to her. They met in the old wine cellar beneath Highgarden. No banners, no names, just strategy. "If we wait for kings to act, we rot," she said once. "So let's move before they even rise." By the end of 270 AC, Olenna had done more than build marriages. She had reshaped the Reach. Mace sat the seat. Luther wore the cloak. But Olenna wielded the power. She was no longer just the Lady of Highgarden. She was its architect, its whisper, its queen. She was the woman who could whisper a wedding into being, or a war. And Westeros, though it hadn't realized it yet, was now dancing to her tune. Chapter 6, Widow's Work. Highgarden, 270 to 280 AC. It happened just as Olenna always feared, dramatically, publicly, and utterly stupidly. Luther Tyrell died while hawking, not in battle, not of illness, not even in bed with the wrong woman, which Olenna might have forgiven for style points. No. He rode straight off a cliff. Looking up, the captain of the guard reported, avoiding her eyes. "At the hawk, my lady." Olenna stared at him for a long moment, then calmly set her goblet down. "So," she said, "he died admiring a bird and ignoring the ground beneath him." The captain nodded. She sighed, fitting, tragic, and infuriatingly on brand. The funeral was lavish, not for grief. Olenna had none left to spare, but because appearances mattered. The Reach expected roses, song, a grief-stricken widow in shadow black with trembling hands and tear-streaked cheeks. They got Olenna. In black, yes, but dry-eyed, chin up and issuing orders between hymns. No, not that bard. The one who doesn't sound like he's bleeding from the throat. More lilies, fewer willows. He wasn't melancholy, he was oblivious. And tell the kitchen, if the trout is dry again, I will hang the cook by her apron strings. When Mace tried to give a speech about how much father meant to us all, Olenna cleared her throat just once, and he immediately sat down. She didn't eulogize. Instead, she placed a single hawk feather on Luther's chest, leaned in, and whispered, "You were kind, and very nearly clever, but you never stood a chance in the end, did you?" Then she kissed his forehead and walked away. The Reach buried its lord, and raised its queen. The mask drops. Widowhood agreed with her. No more subtle nods at council meetings. No more suggestions passed through Luther like notes through a broken raven. Olenna took her seat at the head of the table, literally. "My son is Lord of Highgarden," she said, "and I am his mother, which means if you want to get to him, you go through me." A few lords scoffed. They didn't scoff twice. One she buried in debt. Another she embarrassed at court with a well-timed rumor about a goat, a glove, and a bottle of lemon oil. The garden grows thorny. Highgarden flourished under Olenna's reign, not despite her steel, but because of it. She modernized trade routes, established direct grain pipelines to the crown lands, and cut tariffs for the Dornish just long enough to get what she wanted: a marriage alliance, a hostage swap, and 3 very potent rumors about their prince's appetites. The small folk adored her. She paid debts quickly, punished tax cheats mercilessly, and held open court on the 1st of every month where peasants could speak freely. When one poor woman claimed the local knight had stolen her pig, Olenna summoned him the next day. "I trust the pig was delicious?" she asked sweetly. The knight stammered. "I suggest you replace it," she continued, "with 3 pigs, a barrel of apples, and a public apology. Or I'll see to it that your own sausage ends up on her spit." He complied. The Rose Council evolves. Her private group of advisors, the Rose Council, expanded. She brought in a pirate from the Stepstones with an uncanny nose for shipping trends, a Targaryen bastard with dragon dreams and a library of blackmail, and a blind scribe from Essos who could memorize and recite entire books after one reading. They met under candlelight in the vaults below Highgarden. No names, no records, just strategy. Mace never knew. He thought his victories were his own. Olenna let him believe it. The games of King's Landing. She watched from afar as the realm changed. Madness grew in the capital. Targaryens turned on each other. Rebels whispered in the Stormlands. The North stirred, The East simmered, and House Lannister grew fat off gold and arrogance. Olenna took notes. She sent gifts to Casterly Rock, Arbor Gold, satirical poetry, and once, a perfectly roasted boar with an apple in its mouth and a scroll in its rump that read, "For when you run out of heirs." Tywin never responded. She marked it as a success. The lovers, still. Even as a widow, Olenna indulged. Discreet, of course. Always discreet. A sell-sail with teeth like pearls and muscles like gods. A playwright from Braavos who begged to write a comedy about her, and a wandering septon who claimed he could read her future in the lines of her hands. She offered him her palm. He kissed it. "I see power," he whispered. "Danger, lust." She pulled her hand away and grinned. "You forgot sarcasm. Mace, the Lord of Nothing." He grew older, softer, fatter. He gave long speeches no one remembered and made decisions that Olenna had quietly undone by breakfast. She trained him like a war horse, feed him compliments, slap him with reality when necessary, and make sure he didn't bolt toward disaster. When he asked once whether he should be more involved in foreign policy, Olenna replied, "Yes, you should involve yourself by staying far away from it." "But mother—" "Mace, darling, you couldn't negotiate your way out of a wet blanket with a sword. Let me do the heavy lifting. You just smile and wave. Preferably at someone who can't hear you." By 280 AC, Olenna Tyrell was no longer simply a widow. She was the architect of a dynasty, the ruler behind the curtain, the whisper that turned into decree. The reason Highgarden remained untouched while the rest of the realm burned, plotted, or drank itself into oblivion. Her enemies underestimated her. Her allies respected her. And her children? They feared her, though they'd never admit it. The oaf had died, the mask had fallen, the claws were out, and the Queen of Thorns was just getting started. Chapter 7, The Spider and the Thorn, King's Landing, 280 to 285 AC. Varys thought he was prepared. He'd read the letters, he'd studied the ledgers. He'd bribed a septon who claimed Olenna once confessed to poisoning a lover with sweet cream and crushed peach pits. But when Lady Olenna Redwyne Tyrell stepped into King's Landing for the first time in 15 years, the spider knew one thing with absolute certainty. He wasn't ready. The first meeting. It took place in the Red Keep, beneath a painted ceiling of dragons and conquest. Varys wore silk the color of old wine and a smile that never reached his eyes. Olenna wore black with emerald trim and a brooch shaped like a thorn. "Lord Varys," she said with a nod that could cut granite. Or should I say, "Lord Whispers"? "Lady Olenna," he replied smoothly. "The court has missed your presence." "The court lacks taste," she said, "and teeth. I intend to fix both." He gestured for tea. She gestured for wine. It was not a negotiation, it was a sparring match, and Varys, for once, found himself on the defensive. The dialogue. He asked about trade in the Reach. She replied with wheat prices, lordly missteps, and a colorful tale involving Lord Redlake, a runaway goat, and a misplaced heirloom she assured him was no longer wearable in polite company. He shifted tactics. "You must be proud of your son's leadership." Olenna sipped her wine. "Mace is a splendid figurehead. I meant, oh, don't finish. I'd hate to make you lie." A beat. Then Varys chuckled. It wasn't joy, it was respect. "Some say your influence rivals the Queen's. I should hope it surpasses hers," Olenna replied. She's still confused by forks. The game begins. Olenna's presence in the capital wasn't ceremonial. It was strategic. She was planting seeds, listening, measuring. She knew of Prince Rhaegar's melancholy. She knew of Mad King Aerys's redecorating habits. And she especially knew that House Tyrell was being watched, envied, whispered about, and quietly resented. So she played the game in reverse. She offered aid to House Martell on grain shipments. She flirted with the idea of a betrothal between a Tyrell cousin and a Baratheon bastard. She sent a gift to Pycelle, a copy of Maester Morel's manual on modesty, annotated. And all the while she drank with the dowager ladies and made backhanded compliments with surgical precision. The Queen's dinner. Queen Rhaella, seeking unity, invited Olenna to a private supper. It was a mistake. Rhaella, dressed like a dusty tapestry, spoke of prophecy and proper conduct. Olenna, resplendent in violet and diamonds, listened with a neutral face and a sharp tongue coiled behind her teeth. When the queen said, "It's important women show restraint," Olenna replied, "Indeed. Which is why I didn't correct your etiquette just now." Rhaella blinked. "Didn't want to embarrass you," Olenna added sweetly. The rest of the dinner was silent but for the sound of silverware scraping against pride. Varys returns. Their next conversation took place in the gardens. "I must ask," Varys began, "what you truly seek here." Olenna didn't pretend. "A queen," she said, "of my own making." He raised a painted brow. "For Marjorie? No, for me," she said flatly. "She's just the crown. And the king? Preferably young, biddable, and prone to long rides away from court?" Varys studied her. "You're not like the others," he said softly. "I know," Olenna replied. "It's why I'm not dead, the rumor she left behind." When she returned to Highgarden weeks later, she left behind a trail of accidental sightings with Lord Baelish, a whispered suggestion that the Redwynes were hiding a Targaryen bastard, a rumor that she discovered a cure for impotency, which spread faster than wildfire and was inconveniently traced back to Mace's stable boy. The letter. Varys received it a week later, a sealed envelope, scented faintly of lemon and mint. Inside, a single note in sharp, slanted ink. "You spin webs, Lord Varys. I prune gardens. Let's not tangle. Our tools are messy." No signature, just a tiny pressed flower, a rose, with a thorn still attached. Chapter 8, War of Roses, Westeros in Rebellion, 285 to 298 AC. The realm burned. And Olenna Tyrell poured wine. Not out of indifference, not even celebration. She just understood what too many fools didn't. War is a garden. You don't weep when the weeds die. You weed faster. The rebellion begins. When Robert Baratheon raised his banners, Olenna Tyrell didn't panic. She plotted. The Reach was slow to join the fight, hedging its loyalties behind Highgarden's caution. Mace wanted to throw all their forces behind the crown, march north, wave banners, chant songs. Olenna waved a finger in his face and shut that down before the lemon cakes were served. "We do not leap into chaos, darling," she said. "We prepare for the winner." "But mother," Mace, "if you go north and the rebels win, we're traitors. If you stay put and smile, we're courted, but father is dead." And frankly, he'd agree with me if he hadn't been looking at birds instead of cliffs. The true game. While the realm picked sides, Olenna picked players. She sent quiet messages to House Martell, condolences for Aelia, laced with promises of grain and shared grief. She hosted a feast for traveling river lords, where wine flowed and tongues wagged, enough to learn which bannermen were hedging their loyalty. And she quietly met with messengers from the Westerlands. A Lannister cousin, oily and stupid, proposed a Tyrell Lannister marriage. Olenna served him cold pheasant and even colder silence. "You mistake me for a desperate matchmaker," she said. "I'm not brokering marriage. I'm vetting bloodlines, Mace's march." Eventually, the Reach had to act. The Tyrells couldn't be seen as cowards. So Olenna let Mace march, let being the operative word. She packed his retinue with advisors loyal to her, supplied the army with coin she tracked personally, and ensured his commanders reported back to Highgarden before they reported to him. He took Ashford. He took Bitterbridge. He claimed victories he didn't earn. Olenna wrote the victory speeches herself. "Let him think he's a lion," she told her steward. "So long as I hold the leash, Rhaegar falls, and so do the Targaryens." When news reached her of Rhaegar's death at the Trident, Olenna paused mid-sip of her morning wine. "Shame," she murmured. "He was at least pleasant to look at. The Mad King died. The dragons were dead or gone. The Baratheon boar now ruled. And House Tyrell? Untouched, fed, supplied, still rich, still beautiful." Mace returned to Highgarden expecting cheers. He got them. Olenna made sure of it. She even kissed his forehead. Then promptly restructured the Reach's grain exports and made deals with Crownland merchants before Robert's fat arse even touched the throne. The Lion and the Rose. With Robert Baratheon on the Iron Throne, the Lannisters tightened their grip. Olenna kept her distance. She watched Cersei rise. She watched her son become king. She watched madness repackaged as power. And Olenna waited. She turned her attention to Margaery. The flower grows. Margaery was clever. Not Olenna clever, but enough to be shaped. Enough to be polished into something queen-like. Olenna taught her not just courtly manners, but courtly weapons. A well-timed rumor is sharper than a sword, she said over breakfast, and much cleaner. Margaery practiced, flirted with lords, memorized names, asked pointed questions that made older men sweat and older women grind their teeth. When Mace suggested she marry a Frey, Olenna laughed so hard she nearly choked on her wine. "She's not marrying a bridge troll," she said. "She's marrying a king. Loras and the Knight of Flowers. Loras rose as well, beautiful, deadly, beloved by the masses. Olenna knew about his preferences. She didn't care. She only cared that he could tilt, smile, and make nobles want to stand beside House Tyrell. If he can't give us heirs, she said, he can at least give us headlines, the feasts and the farce. By 298 AC, the Seven Kingdoms were dancing again, this time on the edge of swords. Ned Stark marched south. Robert drank himself toward an early grave. Cersei schemed. The Baratheon brothers snarled, and Olenna prepared her next move. A feast at Highgarden, lavish and bright. Lannister cousins, Baratheon bastards. Even Littlefinger made an appearance, oily as ever. Olenna toasted them all, listened to their boasts, and smiled. They thought they were kings. She knew better. The plan begins. As the sun set over the vines of Highgarden, Olenna walked with Margaery through the gardens. "Tell me, child," she asked, "what do you want?" "To matter," Margaery said, "to be more than beautiful, more than some man's wife." Olenna took her hand. "Then you must do what I've done, which is smile at fools, kiss liars, and make the world believe you are exactly what they want until it's too late to stop you." Chapter 9. The Queen's Hand. King's Landing, 298 to 299 AC. They arrived in the capital like flowers in spring. Margaery Tyrell, Loras Tyrell, Mace Tyrell. And behind them, the true power of the Reach, Olenna Tyrell, dressed in black and green, riding not in a gilded litter, but in an open carriage, so the court could see her watching. Let the fools smile. She was counting banners, the match, Margaery and Renly. It began with Renly Baratheon. Handsome, charming, laughing at the right jokes, betting the wrong people. But Olenna didn't need him to be faithful. She needed him to wear the damn crown. "You'll marry him," she told Margaery one morning over lemon cakes. "He's not like other men," Margaery said, choosing her words carefully. Olenna waved a hand. "Sweetheart, I don't care if he fucks horses as long as he makes you a queen." Margaery blinked. "Just smile, flatter his armor, and let your brother keep him happy behind the curtains. Everyone wins." The wedding preparations were swift and strategic. Olenna brokered half a dozen trade deals during the engagement, strengthened alliances with the Stormlands, and ensured Renly's wardrobe discreetly included green and gold. And when a Reach lord scoffed at marrying into a gay rebellion, Olenna replied, "Well, at least someone's getting satisfied in this marriage. Can you say the same, Lord Butterwell?" The Cersei encounter. She met Cersei in the Great Sept of Baelor. It was a silent prayer service. It did not remain silent. Cersei, in full lioness mode, made a passive remark about younger women not knowing their place. Olenna leaned in. "Your place seems to be 2 steps behind your son. Or is it 3 now? I lose count." Cersei smiled. "Thin, tight, dangerous. I hear you've come to play politics." "Oh no, dear. I've come to clean up after it." That night, rumors flew. Lady Olenna had insulted the Queen Regent, that she'd been escorted out, that she'd been offered a poisoned peach. The truth? She left on her own, with Cersei's dignity still lying in a pew. The court adjusts. In less than a month, Lady Olenna unreplaced 3 of Margaery's attendants with spies loyal to her, and got Pycelle drunk and made him reveal the crown's debt in full detail, and slipped a copy of a Lannister ledger to Baelish, unsigned but perfumed with arbor mint. Unhosted a private tea for Sansa Stark and asked, "If you were queen, dear, what would you change first?" Whispers and thorns. She met with Varys again, this time in the royal gardens. He offered pleasantries. She offered candied plums. "I understand you're getting closer to the queen," he said, sipping his tea. I'm already inside her walls, Olenna replied. Now I'm just measuring where to plant the explosives. He blinked. She offered him a plum, the kingling, Joffrey. Olenna took one look at him during a feast and knew. He's broken, she whispered to Margaery. The kind of broken that cuts people just to hear them scream. He's king, Margaery said. Then we'll need thicker gloves. The plot begins. The wedding plans moved forward, not for Renly anymore. He died screaming in the night, blamed on shadow and smoke. But Olenna wasn't mourning. She was adapting. Robert was dead. Renly was dead. Stannis was busy burning banners. Robb Stark was marching. The realm was chaos again. So Olenna aimed higher. Margaery will marry Joffrey, she told Mace. But she will marry him, survive him, and marry again. Like a good widow. We've got 3 kings left to go. Let's make the most of them. She met with Baelish. He offered her gold. She offered him leverage. We want the same thing, he said. You want chaos. I want control. Don't confuse the two. But we both want Joffrey dead. That they agreed on. The night before the wedding. Olenna sat with Margaery, brushing her hair like she was still a little girl. If you feel fear tomorrow, Olenna said softly, don't show it. Smile, touch his arm, tilt your head. Give the realm what it wants, and when he hurts me... Olenna's hand paused. Then I'll hurt him worse. Chapter 10. A Thorn Among Lions. King's Landing, 299 AC. The bells rang for the wedding of King Joffrey Baratheon and Margaery Tyrell. They rang loud, proud, joyful. They would soon sound like screams. Olenna Tyrell stood near the front of the great sept of Baelor, dressed in green so dark it nearly passed for black. She wore a simple veil, no tears, no prayers, just silence. She hated weddings, too many vows, not enough leverage, the feast of fools. The reception was excessive even by Baratheon Lannister standards. Singers, jesters, a 5-tiered pie, acrobats, a dwarf performance that made everyone laugh except Tyrion and people with souls. Olenna sat near Mace, who was beaming like a child in a sweet shop. Loras, seated across from them, looked like he was trying to will himself into the goblet. Joffrey, of course, was giddy, drunk on power, sneering, mocking Tyrion, waving his new Valyrian steel sword like a butcher who'd just discovered knives. He called for more wine. Margaery poured it, and Olenna leaned in. She adjusted her granddaughter's necklace, the one she herself had placed just hours earlier. Let me fix that, dear, she said. Her fingers worked quickly. 1 stone, gone. It looked like nothing, because it was everything, the plums. Earlier that day, Olenna had delivered a bowl of candied plums to the royal kitchens. A small gesture, a sweet treat, not unusual, not suspicious. Except those plums had been soaked in strangler, a rare poison, tasteless and odorless, that closed a man's throat in seconds. It wouldn't have worked on the wine alone. But eaten first, the perfect fuse. Joffrey downed his cup, then another, then took a bite of pigeon pie and the death of a king. It began with a cough, then a choke, then the kind of sound a pig makes when its throat is slit, but from the inside out. Joffrey's eyes bulged. He clawed at his neck. Blood foamed at his lips. The hall panicked, screams, shouts, guards, shattered goblets, Sansa fleeing, Tyrion frozen, then framed. And through it all, Olenna sat, still, sipping wine, watching the boy who once laughed as people screamed now choke on his own breath. He reached toward her. She didn't flinch. Let the lion cub learn what it means to play with thorns. The aftermath. The city reeled. Cersei wept blood. Shaemi stormed. Tywin demanded answers. They found none. The necklace was gone. The kitchens purged. Blame shifted, danced, pointed. Olenna, meanwhile, tended to her granddaughter. Margaery sobbed into her lap. I didn't know, she whispered. You didn't need to, Olenna replied, stroking her hair. You only needed to survive the Lannisters. They kept her close after the wedding, too close. Cersei tried to smile. Tyrion tried to see through her. Tywin tried to outmaneuver her. None succeeded. Your house moves fast, Tywin said once. We move correctly, Olenna replied. He studied her. You killed my grandson. I grew tired of monsters, she said softly. Even beautiful ones. He said nothing. She left him with a single rose on the war table. White, pristine, thorned, Her final play. Marjorie was queen again. Joffrey was dead. Sansa gone. The Lannisters off balance. And House Tyrell, richer than ever, respected, feared. Olenna returned to Highgarden within the month. Mace wanted to stay. She told him to sit down, shut up, and write thank you letters to every house that sent condolences. And she, in the quiet of her gardens, finally let herself rest. A little. Years later, a bard wrote a song about the roses of the Reach. He claimed none bloomed brighter than the Tyrells. He never mentioned Olenna by name. Only a verse at the end, a thorn unseen, a whisper sharp, that cut a king and crowned a heart. No sword was drawn, no shield was raised, yet kingdoms fell beneath her gaze. The end, the tale of Lady Olenna. Epilogue, the strangled loss. In her final years, Olenna Tyrell tended her garden, literally. She clipped roses with hands steadier than most women half her age, burned letters with names no longer worth remembering, and laughed, sharp and dry, at Mace's latest failure to outwit a stable boy in Highgarden's affairs. When the Raven came, sealed in gold and crimson, she didn't bother reading it. The arrival of Jaime Lannister told her all she needed to know. They took tea in the solar. Olenna poured. He declined. "You've come to kill me, then," she said, calm as ever. He didn't answer, only produced a small vial and set it on the table. "It's painless," he offered. "You'll drift." "How merciful." She lifted the vial, studied it in the light. And here I thought Cersei would send Qyburn's latest monstrosity. Or worse, Mace. She downed the poison in one sip, then set the glass aside. "Tell Cersei," she said, voice steady, "it was me. I killed Joffrey." Jaime didn't flinch, didn't blink, just turned and walked toward the door. Then he paused, fingers on the frame, voice low. "I know," he said, "I lied. That wasn't milk of the poppy." Olenna blinked. His voice softened. "It was the strangler. Same as you used on my son." Her lips parted, to curse him, to spit, to scream. But no sound came. Her throat closed. Fingers clawed the air. Her chest hit the table with a dull thump. Roses scattered. Blood welled in her eyes. She fell to the floor alone. Not in peace, not in power, but in silence. Because she had done what few ever dared. She played the Game of Thrones and lost. House Tyrell was no more. The epilogue end. Thank you for listening and watching. Please like, share, and comment. And as always, please subscribe if you would like more stories.